very welcome on in to this very special episode as we pay tribute to one of the very, very best ever to wear the Irish vest.
Good fight.
Was it a difficult decision for you to turn pro after getting the bronze medal?
No, it was because, it was always my ambition from day one to turn professional. It was really a matter of when as opposed to if, and being 26 and being at an Olympics, you can't really go any further than a bronze other than getting a gold medal, and to wait 4 years and for the fact that anything can happen, and then I'd be 30 and then I definitely would have missed the boat. So right now is the right time. My main ambition was to make sure I got the right people behind me, and I think in Frank Maloney and now a trainer, Brian Lawrence, I think I've got the right team now to go forward.
As we searching for God in the sky.
Darren Sutherland. When I hear the name Darren Sutherland, I find myself kind of washing over in a mix of emotions and questions and feelings. And what's the mix? I suppose happiness and the vision, the memory of him and his teammates. And I'm conscious, something Ciaran mentioned to me as we recorded the other day, there's a lot of people who may not have been around and may not have been watching boxing, particularly younger fighters and fans, and may not have been lucky enough to watch Darren and his team as they strived for so many years to make that breakthrough. And when they eventually smashed that nearly tag, the always the bridesmaid tag, they subsequently went on and won Ireland's first boxing Olympic medals since those amazing scenes of Wayne McCullough and Michael Carruth 16 years previously. Now you think 16 years of winning without winning an Olympic medal in boxing, it's probably unimaginable right now, because we've kind of got ourselves to a point where the nation almost expects, and it's always the boxers. Let's get that thing straight, isn't it? So I have to be a little bit biased. But truth hurts, and it doesn't have to hurt, it just has to be realised and recognised. And but yeah, the feelings then, pride of course was to see he had so many attributes, and again I'm speaking from a fan's point of view, because it's what I am and what I was and what I always will be. Was a true fan, and he captured my imagination, he captivated me, and I guess it wasn't just his unquestionable talent. He was an absolute phenom, an absolute undoubted future world champion, and safe to say possible multiple world champion. I don't think that's a stretch. But there was the human side to Darren that captivated and captured everybody. He had those sparkling eyes, those just that sparkling smile, that when he smiled and the eyes beamed and glowed as he watched all before him on the podium, and there was a little bit of a criticism that why was he so happy, and that's going to be cleared up here in this one. I know he had just lost, and just shelve that thought for the time being. I promise you, you're going to see and hear here now. I like to try and keep the podcast real and not to avoid the trouble stuff and the difficult stuff, and it is difficult. So if we're talking feelings and emotions, there was the immeasurable heartache when I remember his death, and I've never understood why a fan, which is what I was, as I said, a fan, would feel the loss the way I did feel it. It didn't make sense, and at times, if I'm being honest, it felt a little bit silly. Why would you feel connected so much? And I don't know. And it was with some intrepidation that I kind of ventured into this with Ciaran, and I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did, because I can't not, to be honest with you. It's without dwelling too much on the sad, and sad doesn't even, profound loss. There really isn't a word to measure it. what it does is it gives us a stark reminder. It has to be a reminder. Everybody has a battle. Everybody. Now let's get that straight here and now, and let's just pull this out into the light and let, whether you're 6 foot filly lugging blocks around a building site, mullicking wheelbars of concrete and tough as old boots, or whether you're a little 5 foot Phelim who runs marathons every day, there's not a pick on him, fit as a flea. Maybe you're a little overweight, Tom, Alan, whatever you want to call him, brains to burn, running a massive company, super salary, future intact, everything ahead. And don't forget the likes of the Shaunas, the Marys, the Tinas, or the Johns, the Shauns, the stay-at-home parent. They run their own firm. They may not leave the house and do their 9 to 5 traditional salary at the end of the week. But don't ever be mistaken. Those people run a firm. They run a business. They get 2-3 kids out to school. They get back to clean the house. They do the washing. They do all that has to be done. They cook the food. They prep the food to get everything right. And then they collect the army from school. And it starts again. Don't ever underestimate everybody. Everybody has a battle. Everyone has a fight. It may not be in an Olympic boxing ring. It may not be for a world title in Las Vegas. Every single one of us has a fight. And it goes on. And it goes on behind those gleaming eyes. And it goes on behind those beautiful, amazing smiles. And I guess what it did for me and what it does 10 years later, which is, it's almost hard to even say the word. 10 years on the 14th of September. What Darren's death for me is, it proves that we're no different. We all suffer. We all struggle. Different ways, different times, same hustle. And we just have to talk. Shout out to Anya. I was chatting to her there a little while before as this is my second attempt to record this and keep it somewhat together. Shout out to Anya. As I said, we Irish folk have a tradition, a reputation that follows us around the world for drinking, for talking, for singing, telling stories, communicating. And we've stopped doing that. We've stopped doing it. I don't know whether it's phones, I don't know whether it's anti-social media. Anti-social media is not communicating. It's not going out the door and saying, hey, how are you? Pick one a day, one. If a fella looks like maybe he's just having a bad day, ask him, is he okay? Ask her, ask them. We gotta get back to communicating. We gotta get back to doing what we do. We can't live in this fake social media realm. It's not real, it's not sustainable. It's not. It's just not. And I get things change, and I get times move, and everything has to change, and that's good. Change is good if it's for the better, and when it's for the better. Overall, for me, Darren Sutherland was, and he forever will be, Irish boxing's brightest light. It'll be the brightest lights in the sky. And it pains me to say that. It pains me not to have seen him collect his belts and his titles and to live and fulfill that potential and to find all the trappings. And I understand, and you'll hear the funny parts of the interviews where no doubt the undoubted wealth that would have been accumulated from such a successful career would have been well-minded. as you'll hear Ciaran allude to in a few minutes. But it's a heartbreak. It's heartbreak for his family, his sisters, his mum and his dad, his friends, his coaches, his teammates, and his fans. And please, if we get nothing else from it, please talk, particularly the lads. Come on, lads. It's not that hard. Take the man card out of the arse pocket and put it on the table. I promise you, you'll feel better. When you have to do it, you have to do it. Do not bottle it up. I'm going to ask you to do something here now. I'm going to play a little something. If you just close your eyes, listen to the words, and picture the most beautiful gleaming eyes, and smile.
You look at the guy's record, I'm a bit embarrassed about it, to be honest. The fact that, he's lost more than he's won, but I don't choose the opponents. And, Frank and Brian have both said to me that, look, you do your job in the ring, and we'll do ours outside of picking the opponent. So I can only beat who's in front of me, and I'm going to treat this guy like any other. I'm not even going to bother thinking about the record. You know, I've trained really hard for the fight, and you know, if he's not up to scratch, then I'll be looking to take him out early.
Hard not to get goosebumps when you hear that. But it's not all sad. It's not all sad. We're going to celebrate. We're going to remember the amazing achievements. We're going to remember the legacy left behind. And we're going to remember the funny stories of how Darren wasn't too fond of parting with the pound note. And Ciaran, McIvor of Boxing Bant, of course you'll find them on the YouTube. I'll put a link to them in the show notes. Ciaran was very, very generous and very good to reach out to me and have a chat, have a discussion about the documentary that he's about to release on the memory and the life of this great man. And myself and Ciaran spoke for a good hour and a half, I would say, earlier in the week.
I can't remember what it was. I think I was speaking to a friend, and they were talking about celebrities and things like that that all seemed to die at the age of 27. You know what I mean? All these people, you know, Kurt Cobain, you know, that kind of stuff. Like,
yep.
You know what I mean? 10 years ago, and I don't know how it came across me. It was like a post or something like that, and then it was Darren, and I just realised to myself, I was like, he was going to be passed away 10 years this September 14th, and it just kind of it was like, God, you know, I could really make a documentary here to remember him, because how he passed away and things like that, you know, back then, you know, for a boxer, it was still very much a new kind of thing, you know what I mean? Suicide, all these types of things, it wasn't really spoken about, especially with a boxer. And him in particular as well, it was quite a shock to the country. And I thought, you know, you look at the amount of people that talk about mental health and things like that now across social media and across just in general, like now it's so spoken about, and there's so many things to bring awareness to it that wasn't around back then, and it's changed so much now in 10 years since he's passed away. And I thought it'd just be nice to do something to you know, do a little small documentary about him, speaking with people that knew him, just to remember him, who he was, and because there's a lot of people who wouldn't know who he was right now and how good he was and his mentality. And the more I delved into him as a person, like when I was researching for it, the more I actually became fascinated by him and by his mentality. And it was really, really interesting. So I wanted to keep delving, and that's kind of how it came about, really.
He caught my imagination from his battles, I suppose. He polarized the stadium. He went from being the boo boy to being the darling of the crowd to being a national hero, really. He captured the imagination. He had everything. He just had that twinkle in his eye when the camera had come on. He had a little bit of devilment in him, but he was always conscious of, he would have been tailor-made, I believe.
Yeah, like when Darren got into boxing, his dream was to be a pro straight away. He did like things like Olympic medals, things that weren't actually in his mindset at all. That's not something that he wanted to do. He was over in the Ingle gym when he was only about 15, 16, and obviously the charisma kind of came from there, because Brendan would have his ways of helping people with the personalities. You know, there's videos that be in the documentary of him, you know, in the middle of the ring, and he'd have to sing in front of everyone, you know. But he only ever wanted to be pro, and he was offered lots of pro contracts then when he was like about 20 years old, but he knew he had to get education behind him, because he could see what was happening to a lot of other pros in the gym. A lot of them were leaving with nothing, and he knew that boxing wasn't going to do anything for him, so he went and got his education at home. But in terms of what you're saying there, like, he was made for it because of that style that he had from Brendan Ingalls, and because he wanted to be a pro, he had like a pro style, so he was tailor made for it. So, you know, when his issue he had in amateurs was the first rounder, so he was struggling to get going. Mm-hmm. So he kind of just, as soon as he went to the pro game, it was like literally no difference in the way he fought, and he was just made for it, and like James McCullough said all the time, his jab, he just break you down with it, and he says, the thoughts of having to fight him as a pro would have been horrible, because he would have been even fitter and quicker and stronger, and he would have been able to go for it. You'd have to spend more rounds with him, so he really was made for it. I know Brian Lawrence, who trained him in the pros, he just had him doing fitness stuff because he was just so tailor-made for the pro game, and he had plenty of offers. He had loads of offers. As soon as he won the medal, he had loads of offers, but obviously he went with Frank Maloney Promotions in the end. Like,
when it happened, Ireland was a different place. It was when someone died, when there was a suicide, you'd be told it was a tragic death, and that's how you always knew something. Or if somebody was suffering they were struggling with their nerves. That's what we used to hear years ago. It was as if Ireland at that time wasn't able to deal with it, and there wasn't a balance put to it. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, like it's difficult, like, because like Darren, from what I've understood from studying him and researching on him, his personality, like, when you were to look at him, he looked like he had a lot of charisma and stuff like that, but he was actually quite a little bit insecure about himself, and his biggest insecurity was friends, in terms of, if he had a row with someone, you know what I mean, he couldn't let it go. He would have to be outside your door 6 a.m. knocking on it to to make amends. Do you know what I mean? He was that type of person, and letting people down was probably his biggest fear, I imagine, from what I've researched. You know what I mean? And he constantly needed reassurance all the time. That's not right. Not all the time, but every so often he would need that person beside him to reach. So in Ireland he had Jim Halpin, in Sheffield he had Brendan Ingle, and when he was over there in Bromley, he actually had his own counsellor who he would speak to regularly on the phone and things like that. He always needed that bit of reassurance, and when it happened, it was just so hard to understand from everyone why it happened, apart from some of the people that were very, very close to him, But even then, even though they realised that he was in that place, they would have never thought that he would have gone that far, and like Jim had been kind of touched on a few things with me, that the reasons why it ended how it did. It seems like he felt like the walls were closing in on him a little bit, in terms of letting people down, and that was his biggest fear, I think, in life itself. And Jim talked about, like, when he was fighting, everything was, it described him fighting like a puzzle. He said, if a piece of the puzzle was missing, he wouldn't fight. Do you know what I mean? Because he didn't want to have any regrets after he fought or let anyone down. He didn't want to come out of it and go, I didn't make weight properly. He just wouldn't do that. He just would not fight unless everything was in place. And if there was something missing, he wouldn't fight, and that was kind of the argument that happened with Maloney and whatnot. Jim spoke about Darren having a really bad cut under his eye, and it was getting to the point where it was getting infected and stuff, and Darren, he just wouldn't fight if everything was in place, which was rightly so. Do you know what I mean? In the situation that he was in, and from what I understand, the things that were said to him, it made him feel like if he didn't box, even with the injury, he was going to lose everything. Now, that this is all stuff that I've just read and understood, but with the personality that I've studied of Darren, it seems that was like one of the worst things that could happen to someone with his personality, because he must have just ran through his head of just letting people down all the time. And that's just the way he was, he trained all year for the seniors a few years ago. I think it was the last year Andy Lee was competing in it. And, he trained all year for it, but because he didn't train 110% and he missed a couple of days here and there, he just wasn't doing it. And he probably could have won it that year, but he just wouldn't take part in it because every piece of the puzzle had to be in place for him to compete.
I think there was a scene in Saviours, the film, that short film that was made, and you just nailed it there. It was a scene where he was, I won't say it was an argument, but it was certainly a discussion he was having with Pat McCormack at the time. And Pat was saying, look, he was trying as best he could, subtly trying to convince him to enter, and he said no, he wasn't. He just wasn't. And there was no debate, there was no discussion, it was just a flat, I'm not doing it. And that, what you're saying there now, because it almost cut to that scene, you know, where he wasn't training, but he was dropping in just to make sure he was. It's just, I don't know. I suppose when you scratch the surface and when you're all these years later, when you're in a position to speak to the main players in his life and the main people in his life, you get to see these little pieces of a very intricate character and
his personality, do you know what I mean? Like the high performance was made from, and plus with the high performance, everything was paid for him. You know what I mean? So because Darren apparently, from what Evan told me, he was a little bit tight with money. Like there's some stories that being documented that are very funny. Like, but he that was perfect for him because, like I said, he just would leave no stone unturned. He'd have written out what he would eat during the day, and he loved his porridge, and he would bring the porridge with him, even if he was going abroad with the team. He'd have it in his bag. He was so specific about what he'd eat, and they'd have to go to certain stores to get it. And then when he was training, he would, like after training, he was doing an extra 20 minutes extra because he felt like he was letting himself down. And he was a massive middleweight, but he was never struggling to make weight because he was always bang on weight. Because he was just so relentless. Like Kenny Egan spoke about, like the first time and the last time you ever stayed in a room with him, you know, you woke up in the middle of the night and Darren's out in the hall in the sweat gear, like skipping, you know, for his weight. And it's just the way he was. Like, he was just, every stone couldn't be unturned, and the thoughts of letting himself down and letting other people down, it was just kind of at times almost like a fear of failure almost, you know what I mean? And because he knew he was good enough to beat all these people at European level, world level. He knew he was better, but he feel like if he went in the ring and had done everything he could have, then he'd have no regrets if he lost. He just never wanted to have that, you know. He wanted to make sure every stone was unturned. If he lost, he lost. Just like when he won the bronze medal, like as soon as the bell went, some people were moaning as to why he was cheering because he just lost. But he knew he had uncovered every single stone. He knew that he had done everything in his power to win it, and you know he didn't win it, but he knew that he had no regrets about it. You know.
Yeah. Do you think age had anything to play with those fears and insecurities, Ciaran? Because he would have been, I suppose, going to the pro game at the time, he would have been seen as I won't say late, but it would have been. Oh no, maybe not. Yeah, he would have been older than the likes of the Gale and those, wouldn't he?
Yeah, like James only retired this year, and I think James was, I'm just trying to remember now. I think he was around 35, 36, around that age. So he was a little bit older, not much older now, but a little bit older. Yeah. And but they turned pro the same year, and he always wanted to be pro, and I think because he was always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Like, there was no one in the high performance that was going through university. Like, he went back to school. Like, he knew that all these things that had to be in place. So he was boxing and he was doing his degree on the side. And Kenny even said, you know, these lads that are in the high performance saying, well, I don't have time to do my studies and that. He says that's nonsense. Like, he says, you know, Darren was the person who could do it. But Darren knew what was going to happen after boxing if he didn't make it in the pro game, and he had all those things in place. So I don't think he worried about it. He just wanted to make sure that he gave himself the best opportunity in the pro game. And his dream was to be world champion in pros. That's all he wanted to do. Others would say they want to be in the Olympics and win the gold medal. He just wanted to be a world champion and have a belt. And I'm not sure. Like you look at it now, like I don't think age was a massive factor in him turning pro because he was so suited to the pro style. Darren didn't do any 4-rounders. He went straight into 6-rounders.
That's right,
because he was so fit. And I think he would have been escalated quite quickly by Maloney. And that was coming through a time where it was hard to get TV dates and stuff like that as well. So, James and him, and they were fighting on all different types of platforms. So it's hard to know if age had anything to do with it, but one of the reasons why he was happy after the Olympics was because he already knew the next 10 steps ahead. You know what I mean? He was going to go to Bromley, he was going to go pro, and so that was really that'd be my opinion on it now.
Yeah, no, the age, I suppose I'm just looking again at no more than you will have done already, and more than most people, and God help them, the family as well. I suppose you're always looking for something that may have been, and from what you're saying, he was just a very complex character. He was, as we keep saying, he would have been a consummate professional. He was absolutely tailor-built for that lifestyle. I suppose the initial jolt was pulling him out of that secure environment where all those things were done, and when the downtime was, he had the team around him, and then it was bang, he was, and that probably was where the walls began to close, you know. From a family point of view, did you have any interaction with the family?
Yeah, so when I started filming for documentary, I put up a few different things up on Instagram. Shaniqua, his younger sister, contacted me. I think she's abroad. I think she's living in Australia. I want to say, I could be wrong now, but she basically wrote to me just saying, I could probably read it out to you. But she was just very, very thankful about it, because she wanted me to actually send her a few of the clips, because she'd never seen them before, or it was so long since she'd seen them. She said, "Yeah, can you send me them so I can send them to my mother?" And I said, "Yeah, no problem." She said she lives in Australia now, so she said, "I remember when Darren moved to England, we were so close. I was devastated, so he became my pen pal. This is when he was 16 and he moved over, so they were right into each other form back." And she said, "I still read our letters. We wrote back and forth. I can't believe it's 10 years. Feels like yesterday." So she just said, "Thanks for continuing to keep his memory alive." I kind of mentioned Jim a little bit by sending her a video of him and Jim, and just said, she said Jim was one of the nicest men she ever met in her life. Said, and she went to Saviours every Saturday to watch Darren train, and said the Saviours loved them. And that was kind of the only interaction I kind of had.
For some reason, when he did die, it hit me more than it should have, because I don't do celebrity, I don't do fanboys, I've probably had 2 or 3 idols as growing up. Like, something about him just caught my, I don't know, it was because he was so different, it was in every way. And in a good way. There wasn't a side of him that you'd say, "Oh, geez, I wish he wouldn't do that," or "I wish he wouldn't." There was nothing that you could see visibly that you would say, look, they'll get that out of him. He just seemed to be that complete, and it was the first sign for me that these big, tough, strong warriors aren't all what we always think, and that's and that's become very apparent since,
No, yeah, Darren was just a big warrior. He was very much an over warrior, and I think personally he was a very anxious person. He seems to worry about a lot, and he even admitted that himself. But he'd always have going over things in his head. And Jim talked about, at the end of the night, he would be training extra, but also at the end he'd be asking 100 million questions. "What do you think of this? And what do you think of this?" What do you think? And Jim would be like, "It's 10 o'clock here, Darren. We need to get home." So he was just that type of person. Need all attention to talk. But in terms of when he was around the other boxers, he would just kind of train on his own, and he never really took banter well. If they gave him a bit of banter, he'd just walk away, you know. So, but he was able to fall onto the other people in the amateur game. So, you know, if they were away, he would have to come out and eat his meals with the other lads, and there'd be that kind of mixing with people, you know, and then he'd go back and isolate himself. Whereas away in England, there wasn't that at all. It was just complete isolation, pretty much, which isn't healthy for anyone, really. You know, the Jim did go out to visit me in England as well, when he was over there. And even though he'd signed a $100,000 a year contract, he said he was still as tight as ever.
Yeah.
Still, it's just the stories he's telling me. Like one story, he said he texted him and said, Darren said, right, we'll meet for lunch at so and so restaurant, and he said, right, okay. So he was standing outside the restaurant waiting for him, and next thing Darren walked down the road, and he's holding this big massive like lunchbox, like almost like this property, and it's got all this food in it. And he said, Darren, I thought we were going into this restaurant to have lunch. He says, oh yeah, we are, but they let me eat my food in now. It's just Jim was like, yeah, it's just a new level of tightness, you know. But
half a cabin man in him or something.
yeah, I don't know, but it was just like he knew if he was spending his money, he knew that he needed to get everything out of it. Do you know what I mean? Like if he was giving you €10, he wanted to make sure he got everything out of his money. Do you know what I mean? So like whether it was a pair of gloves or whatever it was, you know.
I think Mick Dowling got most of his money, didn't he? Mick was on record as saying that he was always in looking for the bright colours and the match, and everything had to match and everything had to.
Yeah. And the one thing with the pro game he struggled with was, you know, he used to tell all the amateur lads when he came back to visit, he'd be like, you know, you get everything for free. And he says, if I want a strength and conditioning coach or on the physio, I have to go out and get it myself and pay for it, you know. So yeah, but like it's you look at the way he was living his life there now, you know, 10 years on from now, you know, boxers in general are constantly searching to, you know, back then the thing would have been, you know, right, you have to lock yourself away for a camp or whatever, and you just train and you don't speak to people and stuff like that. Whereas now a lot of them are going to camps where there's a lot of fighters in it, or there's a good group of fighters, and you're kind of competing against each other and you're falling against each other. Now you're still on your own, you're still building your own brand and your own name, but there's still other people there in the gym that you're bouncing off. And like you look at Peter Taylor's camp, there's loads of pros in that gym. I go in there all the time, and the sparring is just so spicy. Do you know what I mean? Peter said in an interview with me, you know, you want to put a curtain around the ring at this stage because people in the gym just to be watching. There's that gym, there's Celtic Warriors, you know, there's loads of lads in there. Then you look abroad, you know, you got the Ingle gym, you've got even the Hatton gym. You know, that's the way it's gone now. You know, the fighters need their own kind of little world and their own family, if almost, you know. And
yeah.
Davey Oliver spoke about that, you know, he only lives down the road from his family and stuff, and he's got a child. And, but yeah, he still has other people. It still feels like he's in a team environment as well, you know, and Darren didn't have that. And Darren, you know, his trainer Brian Lawrence said, you know, the first few weeks of training he used to come in skipping and singing, and once he realised that, you know, the pro game was a business and it was different altogether, you know, the smallest student left his face.
Before we get to the elephant in the room, I suppose, I wanted to say to you as well, it seemed almost from the day it happened, there was a curtain pulled. The team went very much, there was very little. I would have thought Kenny would have been a spokesman. He would have been seen as a spokesman, been the captain, and he's a great spokesman. He's a great leader, great everything. But it was, this is only my perception, but it seemed like there was little or nothing said from then till now. It was as if they all dealt with it in their own way. Was that directive, do you think, coming from higher up, or was it just something they decided themselves? They just didn't want to talk about it, or they didn't know what to say, or am I right? Even in is it just something that you think it just seemed to happen that way?
No, I just think I think that, well, first of all, they didn't want to say too many things. Certain people, maybe because they didn't know much about it, but I know Kenny was in a very bad place personally. When it happened already. He was already in an awful place, an awful state, in terms of with his drinking and stuff like that, which he does speak about in the documentary, about, where he was. And for nearly 2 years after that, he was still in a really bad place, with going out and alcohol and things like that. But thank God now he's sober now.
He's a different man, isn't he?
Years now. But, so that's why he never really was able to speak about it that much, and because he was just in such a bad place. And the other lads, they did do other documentaries to speak about him, but I don't know what it was. Like, the problem was, a lot of the time, just Irish media weren't really covering boxing that much at all. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like someone gets built up, and then as soon as they lose, then there's nothing. Like, Darren was the last person to kind of fight in DCU, on TV, Sky, and it's just, there wasn't really a follow-up of media for it. Now, they had recorded the Sabres boxing thing, when he was an amateur, and I think they were wondering when are they going to release it, I presume. Maybe that's what they were thinking, when is the right time to release it, really. And
yeah, it was hard to find that, I have to say. I had to struggle to find that. I don't know, was it ever released?
The Sabres boxing documentary was released on RTE. I think it was only about 2 years ago it was released.
Yeah.
So it was quite a long time after, but I don't know.
And there was a lot of uncertainty around it as well, wasn't there? There was a lot of
well, yeah, the case in terms of the finalise of everything, like in the lead up to how he died, and everything was only kind of settled in 2012 in the courts, so there was a lot of things going on. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons why it was, a lot of people didn't really speak about it that much. And obviously mental health in itself wasn't really something that was spoken about back then. I was only 18, I just finished school, I was in the little PLC course and just walking down Graft Street, and I got given one of these like Metro papers that are for free. I was on the front page, and that was the first time I kind of came into contact with boxing in general. And that's the first boxer I kind of realised or knew that, from Ireland, do you know what I mean, that had made an impact in the country. So, it's mad now thinking about it, like what I've done myself in the last 10 years, being travelling abroad, all these different things in that year. It's mad now. It just seems like such a long time ago, the 10 years,
Do you think, Ciaran, much, if anything, has changed? Is there anything? Has there been anything put in place, or is it still very much down to the fighters themselves to insulate themselves?
Yeah, well, the problem in boxing is, we don't have a PFA, we don't have a FIFA, so they look after the players after life and stuff like that. And the thing is, Darren had all these things in place in case he didn't work out as a boxer, so it's that necessarily. I think it's more so, you look at Anthony Joshua before he turned pro, he gave it a year in between, and he just spoke to constantly different boxers, didn't take any offers, just spoke and had loads of different mentors to kind of advise him, you want to be in this place because there's more people, you want to be in this place because they'll actually look after you as a person. And Kevin Mitchell said the same. Kevin Mitchell said that, he should have been with Tony Sims from the very first day, because he knew him as a person. So I think it's more so, that boxers, some boxers have become more street smart in terms of, back then, like, promoters were really stepping all over some boxers, like Don King, for instance, has burnt all his bridges with TV networks because of what he was doing with boxers, whereas now I think boxers have become a little bit more street smart coming into pro gaming. They're making more informed decisions for themselves to make sure they don't fall into those traps, so I think that I just don't think many boxers now are kind of going, oh yeah, they're getting handed a contract and they're just signing it, so and not to say Darren did think a lot about who he was going to sign with, that Darren had a lot of offers on the table, even more money being offered than what Frank Maloney was offering him, but he trusted Frank, so it's just difficult in the pro game, it's kind of every man for himself kind of thing, and you have to have that pedigree or, to make sure that you get looked after, you see Michael Collins looked after very, very well, because, he made the right choices, the right kind of steps, he's, Matthew Macklin worked, really worked hard to make sure that Top Rank got involved with Michael Collins, and, not necessarily they were going to give him the most money up front, but they were going to look after him. I mean, Macklin knew that they were going to look after him, so I don't know if Darren had that person to kind of, I know he did have the, Declan Brennan who kind of looked after him and advised him, but, Darren didn't want to let anyone down, and all I can tell you is that what Jim said to me in the document is the only thing I can actually say about it. Jim said to me that, he met Darren in London that time I was telling you about, and Darren it was almost like a lump under his skin, under his eye, and he said it looked like it was infected. And he said, Darren, what's wrong with your face? He says, yeah, I know. It's really bad, like, and I need to get seen. I need to let it recover, but Frank Maloney wants me to fight in so many weeks, and Jim was kind of like, you can't fight with that, and Jim said to me that Darren had said it to Frank, and Frank, who's now known as Kelly, Frank said, if he kind of told him, he's like, I can't fight with this cut, and Frank kind of said, well, if you don't, I'm going to take all that money back off you, and I'm going to make sure that we take that house off your parents. Do you know what I mean? And you go home a national disgrace. That's what Jim had told me. Now, Darren, of all the people that didn't want to let anyone down, and in conversations what I've read is with Jim, I imagine that's the one thing with his personality, from what I understand, of not letting people down would have really, really affected him. And we would have really been overthinking that over and over and over and over again, So that's probably the deepest I can go into it with you, because it's from what Jim has told me, so, and you'll see it in the small documentary, Jim saying it to me. So, yeah. That's really as far as I can go.
No, that's fair enough. And I suppose it would have manifested itself with the insecurity that was already starting to build from knowing himself that the eye was a problem. Those words thrown in on top with the personality that he had, and with whatever else was going on, and maybe feeling that it probably manifested itself. I can't surmise. I won't dare insult anybody or otherwise. But God help him. If only someone, if only, and it's a career that we'll always say, if only, in more ways than one. And I don't think there's any doubt. It would have been a case of how many titles, I think, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I just think it's an awful, like, through the whole thing, all I felt was it was just an awful shame, because, like, his division was just so stacked, especially domestically, like I was just thinking, like, the fights he could have had with James DeGale. Like, James went on to be a 2-time world champion, and Darren beat him 4 times out of about 7 in the amateurs. And Darren would have been a better pro than he would have been an amateur. And then, of course, he might, I'd say it probably wouldn't have happened, but there was Carruth fought. He probably could have fought George Groves, Micheal Kessler. So many fights there that could have happened in the super. And because of how he looked after himself, he could still be fighting now. He still could be in the mix against, your Chris Eubanks and things like that. So, that's, and, Callum Smith, etc., etc. But that's what I find a big shame. Like, do you know what I mean? He not only could he be a world champion, because so many promoters were after him, wanted to look after him, he could have been a multiple weight world champion, not a multiple time world champion. Yeah. So, and he probably would have moved up eventually to like
super middle, maybe, or light heavy,
like because he's so big for middleweight. Like James was in super middleweight pretty much his whole career, so I think he would have went to that weight in his career. But I just find that an awful shame more than anything, because he was just getting going, just getting his feet off the ground,
And I've spoken to I spoke to Brian McGee a few months ago, and Brian would have been in that middleweight division. I suppose he was super middleweight, but yeah, those fighters that you're talking about there, he would have been coming in as those guys were coming to the end. So you would have seen it as I won't say gatekeepers, because they were all dangerous right to the end, including Brian himself. I mean, he had some proper battles now, but I would have said Darren was coming through, as you said. He skipped. He wasn't doing 4 or 6 rounds. He was gone straight in, and you can only think what would have been, can't you?
I know. Yeah, that's just the one issue, and like coming back on Darren's personality there again, like about not wanting anyone to dislike him really. Like James DeGale, like when he had his first pro fight, he was getting booed out of the place, and Darren just thought it was disgraceful. And Darren was texting Jim Halpin saying, like, how could they boo their gold medalists and stuff like that? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas like James hated Darren through his whole amateur career. He couldn't stand him.
Oh really?
Just because he beat him so many times. Darren being Darren, when they fought the EU championships, came up to him and was like, what's the issue? Like, why don't you like me? You know what I mean? Like, and James was just having none of it. You know what I mean? So Darren was just that type of personality, and of course Darren beat him up then in the fight. Not because of the argument, but just because he was just so on point, with his fight. But Baby Oliver will tell you, he beat him bad that time. But that was just his personality. Then I mean, why doesn't he like me? He's a competitor in the ring, but in terms of what with James, like, he didn't like him because sometimes Darren to beat him.
I think I remember a couple of nights in the stadium, he had a particularly close one just before he finished with Darren O'Neill. I think Darren was starting to come through, and Darren Sutherland was just about finished. I think I'm right in saying this now. And I remember the crowd was quite split. There was a quite, so you can't help but wonder how now when you know all these things, that it clearly, he gave off this image that nothing bothered him, that it rolled off him like water off a duck's back. But now hearing all that, you can't but believe that it did have an impact on him somewhere along the line as well,
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Just like I said, after if he won, he'd be happy as anything, but he always would think about the next thing, the next step. You've seen the documentary, when he's doing his college work, he's fighting for Ireland, and he's after winning. He's like, really happy. He's like, but I got loads of college work to do, when I get home. That's all he's thinking about, the next thing that he has to do, so.
Fella never slept at all.
Yeah, massive overthinker, I'd say.
If you were to, I suppose, tie it up, what's the best way? I suppose, I'm guessing when most people, I suppose, as with any death, when it passes and time passes, and it's not that it gets easier, I suppose it's not as foremost in your thoughts, but like here now when I'm talking about it and thinking about it with you, my memories start coming back. So I can only imagine when you're interviewing the likes of Jim, Kenny, and people, I'd say it's still quite raw, I'd say, with a lot of people.
Well, Kenny more so, when he's kind of talking about it, you could see at one point he did get quite emotional, but he didn't let it be seen, but I could see it in him. Do you know what I mean? Davey was much more kind of upbeat about it, and then Jim was like, Jim was very, very close to him, but Jim kind of was laughing, talking about the funny things, you know. But I think more so because I never really knew Darren. I never met him, and up until a few years ago, I never really saw his fights. Never knew much about him because boxing I kind of found boxing at a later stage of my life. So I was going back over all this. So, like anyone who's probably going to watch it, there's a lot of people who probably did know him or saw of him, but their memories of him aren't that great. So what I would like people to see when they watch it, it's not going to be a massive like RT documentary. Obviously, it's going to be something with interviewing the three particular people with clips of Darren in it. But I hope that watching it, they'll realise the athlete that he was and the great person he was, and that even people at the very top have their own little insecurities, and that that's perfectly normal, even for people winning medals at Olympics. And I'd hopefully that's what people take away from it, whether it rekindles memories of him, or for people who didn't know him at all, to kind of, because that's kind of like what I got from it. I didn't know him at all. Now at the end of it, I feel like I knew him a little bit.
And that is the very feeling, I guess, that caused me personally and many others at the time to feel it so hard when the great man himself passed. I'm going to close it out. I want to remember it as best we can. You're going to hear the words from the man himself, and a nice close from his long-time rival, and he was a long-time rival and a fierce rival, James DeGale. But it was the most beautiful, touching moment I've heard in quite some time in boxing when he finally managed to get his hands on that IBF world title. And thanks to everybody who's listened. I really appreciate it. It's been a bit squirrely at times. It's been a struggle, but look, I keep saying here, the emotion is real, and everything we do tries to be real. So when you hear it, you know what it's about. I believe possibly somewhere along the line his friends and family and coaches and stuff will listen. I just want to say, from my point of view, I hope we were able to put it together in the most tasteful, respectful, but also humorous way to remember the beautiful side of a man who just brought so much to a sport that we all just love so dearly. So the very last word goes to the beautiful track you hear in the background. It's the Barley Mob, a Clane-based band in County Kildare. They are, I don't believe they're together anymore, but they have an album on YouTube if you get along and have a look at it. Just an incredible song, and it's called Peace of Mind.
I honestly believe that, as a professional, that's the natural law of order. If you're starting out with your first couple of fights, you shouldn't be on top of the bill, because I have to earn that right. Yes, I'm an Olympic medalist, but as a professional, I've had one round. That's it. So it takes time, and especially if you're boxing a lower level of opposition that you're expected to blow away. You can't be topping bills with that type of unless that's what the people want. But for now, I'm happy enough to just, do my thing on the undercard and work my way up. And hopefully then next year when I start challenging for titles, etc., then I'll be able to headline a bill.
We've been shot down and I've been betrayed, but
It's for Darren Sutherland as well, of course, my late rival. He obviously, when he took his life back in 2009 was horrendous, and from when he passed, I've always had DS on my shorts, and this world title is for him as well.